I have new neighbors. They bought the old Henderson house located on a neighboring road. They were rumored to be Yankees, and no one knew anything about them. Apparently, they were quite prosperous. The Hendersons had a two-story farmhouse, a barn, outbuildings, and 212 acres of land. The farm was good until Mr. Henderson grew old. His daughters moved away, and there was no one to run the farm, so he put it up for sale and moved farther south. This made the girls angry. They were afraid he would spend their inheritance before he died. He was of sound mind and body, so there was nothing they could do about it. I thought it was funny. I never liked girls. I secretly agreed with my aunt when she snorted and said they were showing off too much to be decent. It's old Southern speech for snobs. I met them by chance. Her car, a Cadillac, was on the side of the road, steam coming from under the hood. I pulled over. That's what neighbors do. She must have seen too many redneck horror movies because she didn't open the door or roll down the window, just stared at me with eyes that bordered on panic. It was raining and getting colder, so I got back in my truck and drove away. When I got to the top of Henderson Hill, I called the sheriff's department and told them about it. Everyone knows you have to get to the top of the hill to get a signal. Until then, you're in a dead zone. Well, at least that's what the locals think. Well, damn it, Will, why didn't you help her? They were our county police, to protect and serve unless it was too hot, too cold, raining, or a game was in progress. In other situations, they were a Johnny on the spot. I tried. Wendell, she wouldn't open the door. I can't just leave her there. Get out and do something. Okay, let me find my slicker. Did you notice it's raining? Yeah, and it's cold. Besides, it's already dark and she's probably scared to death, so hurry up. If you hurry, I have leftover barbecue from the Democrat rally. You can take it to the station. There's buns and salad too. You can take those with you. Do you have any baked beans or potato salad? Take your time, Wendell. If you hurry, I might be persuaded to give up a couple slices of the fat pie. Okay, no offense. I'll be there in about 10 minutes. Does this cake have frosting? 20 minutes later, he met me and we drove back down the hill. She was still there crying. Wendell identified herself and she rolled down her window. Ma'am, do you need help? Yes, please. Smoke started coming from under the hood and it just stalled. I couldn't get through to anyone. It's a good thing you found me. I didn't find you, ma'am. Will did. Why don't you open the lock and let him look under the hood? He wasn't a bad mechanic. I used to be a pretty good mechanic before everything became computerized. Now you needed a PhD from MIT to do it, or you were out of a job. I couldn't afford the new equipment, so I stopped. It was a hobby anyway, not a way to make a living. It took about 2 seconds to see the problem. The lower radiator hose was ruptured. Damn it, it had always been the bottom one. You need a new radiator hose, ma'am. Call AAA when Wendell drives you home and they'll come and get it. It's easy to fix. They should be done before lunch. Not today. Billy's out of town, remember? His daughter's getting married on Sunday. He won't be back until Tuesday. Wendell looked too happy saying that. She went back into panic mode. I can't just leave him here. My husband would kill me. I stared at Wendell, watching the gears of his little brain turn. Don't say it, damn it, he said it. Hey, Will, why don't you take one of your heavy trailers and haul it for her? It was late, cold, raining, and I was late for dinner. But you can't leave your neighbors, especially frightened women, in trouble. I think you can. I'll take it to my lot and leave it behind the fence for safety. Then whoever fixes it won't have to go after him to do it. Is that okay with you? Thank you. We'll pay whatever you charge. Take me home, officer. She said officer, like it was something better than God, and Wendell couldn't get his door open fast enough. Then there was a crackle in the radio. A wreck on Route 12. He was closest. Damn this rain. Sorry, ladies. Will pick you up and I gotta go. Will, don't eat that kebab. I'll come back later. Sure, I'll put it in the refrigerator at the store. You know where the keys are. Lock it behind you this time. I don't need the cat having kittens again. You're never going to let me forget that, are you? No, as long as the odor holds. Mrs. Hatfield, are you ready? She finally gave us her name, and I guess if the cop vouched for me, I really wasn't a serial homicidal maniac who preyed on older, attractive Yanks. She still sat as far away from me as she could. She owned Henderson's place with her husband. When we pulled up to the house, there were no lights on. Why aren't the lights on? Because the power went out. Didn't you notice how dark it was the last mile? What am I going to do? Do you have a flashlight, lanterns, and the like? Not that I know of. Well, Ms. Hatfield, if you're going to live in the village, it's not a bad investment. Mr. Henderson had a generator in the store. Is it still there? I don't know. We haven't had time to research yet. Well, put on your adventure hat. If it's still there, it means it's connected to the power grid. She was lucky. The machine was still in place and running, but barely. A large diesel unit, it was making a hellish rumble in the walls of the building. It had enough fuel for about 4 hours. If it doesn't go out, you'll be fine until the power comes back on. They don't usually shut it off for long this time of year. If I were you, I'd adjust the thing and invest in a barrel of diesel just in case. She nodded furiously, making notes on her clipboard. I'm going to go get your car now. Here's my card with the license plates. If you need anything before your husband gets back, call me. Your car will be parked on my lot. The address is on the card. Good night, Ms. Hatfield. I can't thank you enough. Don't worry about it. Good night. After making sure she was safe, I left after calling Sherry, knowing I'd get a barrage of slop. Where have you been? Why didn't you call? No, you're fine. No, I missed you. I appealed to her delicate sensibilities. Sorry, babe, I got a call from the police. Billy's away for the weekend, and they asked me to pick up the car from the curb. I'll be home in an hour and a half. I hope you squeeze the crap out of them for making you work in this weather. I'll get mine, don't worry. It was all about money. I didn't realize it. Her parents were pretty well off, and I was doing okay. As far as I knew, she'd never needed anything, but the way she acted, you'd think we were living in poverty. She hadn't been like that until about a year ago. I always wondered what had triggered it. I picked up the trailer, took the car, and was home when promised. She had already gone to bed, leaving me a note that dinner was in the microwave. A quick snack, a quick shower, and I was dead to the world until my alarm clock rang. The next day was sunny and warm, making me forget about the cold rain the day before. I didn't have much to do at the store, so I went to Advance, got a hose, rolled the car off the trailer, and fixed it. It was lunchtime, and a man in his 40s, wearing a suit, tie, polished fingertips, and a concerned expression, entered the office. I'm Bennett Hatfield. I'm here to make arrangements to have my wife's car towed to the garage. Could you tell me the best mechanic in town? He was talking to Charlie, my assistant and senior associate. He, Bobby, and Myra were my employees and friends. I was in the equipment rental business, backhoes, bulldozers, tractors, ditch diggers, and the like. It was good business. Nobody was going to give $29,000 or more for an excavator to do a few hours of work when you could rent one for a few hundred. The downturn in the economy actually helped my business. More and more people were doing things themselves instead of hiring out. My equipment was not known for beauty, but they were all serviceable mechanically, and the dirt didn't care if you had new paint. I took a little less than the chains, and it worked out. Charlie pointed at me and walked over. He held out his hand. Bennett Hatfield. I couldn't help but smirk. Will McCoy. Myra was standing behind us. She usually does costumes, and she thought he had come to rent something from our party supplies department. She burst into laughter. He frowned. Sorry, Mr. Hatfield, we're not laughing at you. Come to think of it, Hatfield and McCoy? He stood for a moment, then smiled back. I hope we won't be feuding. I left my shooting iron in Philadelphia. Okay, I melted mine into a plowshare. What can I do for you? I'm here to make arrangements to have my wife's car towed to the garage. I don't know anyone in town. Can you recommend someone? Don't worry. I had some free time this morning and I fixed it. All it needs is a new hose and some antifreeze. Bring your wife anytime before 6 and she can drive it home. He looked surprised. Well, okay. How much do I owe you? $40. The receipt for the hose and antifreeze is in the dashboard. That's wrong. Yes, that's right. Check the check. No, I meant, how much does your work cost? Oh, I can't charge you any money. I don't make my living as a mechanic, and that wouldn't be right. We're neighbors. I live on Howell Road, you live on Henderson Road, our houses are practically right next to each other. Down here, you don't charge your neighbors for kindness, it's just not customary. He looked confused, and I tried to explain. If you wanted to rent an excavator, I would charge you money. Your wife told me you're a lawyer, so if I went to you for legal advice, I would expect you to charge me money. But if I asked if I could borrow a tool or if you needed a ride somewhere, if money was offered, someone would take offense. Understand? He nodded. I guess so. It just takes a little getting used to. Well, I can't thank you enough. He returned 45 minutes later with his wife. She was more attractive than I had anticipated, and younger too, but not enough to be a trophy wife. 40 maybe, but she looked about 30. I guess a life of luxury isn't as exhausting as working for a living. Her husband just left her, too busy with his lawyer stuff, I guess. She thanked me repeatedly for my help until I finally asked her to stop. That's enough, Ms. Hatfield. It's no big deal. Maybe down here, but where I'm from, it's a pretty prominent place. And since we're neighbors, call me Angie. She held out her hand. Will, and this is Myra and Charlie. They were practically breathing down my neck, trying to find out more about her. She smiled, shook their hands, and instead of leaving, she asked Myra to give her a tour, stopping and looking at various pieces of equipment and asking a million questions. She particularly appreciated the party supplies and rentals, especially the castle. The castle was a circus tent with turrets and flags. If necessary, it could be divided into rooms of different sizes. It was very popular for weddings. It was once a real circus tent, but the circus closed down and I got it for next to nothing at an auction. With him and a few small tents, I could turn a field into a fairy tale in 24 hours. Sherry was on edge again. She wanted a new car, a Cadillac like our new neighbor had. Her Chevrolet Impala, which she just had to get 2 years ago, was no longer satisfactory. I tried to remind her that if we bought it, she couldn't trade it in for 4 years. That was the only way I would agree to buy it. She scoffed. This thing is almost worn out. It had 39,000 on it. I need a new car. Why are you arguing with me? Because you don't need a new car, you just want one. We can't keep up with the neighbors, Sherry. He's a lawyer for goodness sake. Your car will do just fine. If you don't think so, you can buy it yourself, as long as my name doesn't appear on the paperwork. I had her. Her credit history was terrible. While we were dating, she defaulted on a car loan and some credit card debt. I helped her get her car back, but I wouldn't help her with the credit card. She refused to pay it off. I don't believe in credit cards. They are a trap and a waste. But you have two. Right, and both are business-related. The American Express I use only as needed, and the other one I use twice a year, just to keep it active. I use them if I find a good deal on equipment purchases, and that's it. I made her sign a prenup to exclude my house and business from the community property. My parents owned the house, and when they retired, they went to my sister's house in California, fell in love with it, and moved out, leaving the house to me. We hadn't even formalized the transfer of ownership yet. There was no rush in sight. Sherry thought we did, and I never thought to bring it up. All the paperwork was filled out just in case. I kind of fell into my business. I was doing subcontract work for builders, mostly site preparation, and I got tired of driving 45 miles to get the equipment I needed. I had some money, my parents lent me some more, and I went into business. For the first 3 years, I invested almost all of my profits in the business, buying new equipment. In the 4th year, I paid my parents back. By the time I met and married Sherry, I was proud of what I had accomplished in such a short time and didn't want to lose it. We met at a Christmas party thrown by one of the contractors I had a lot of business with. I usually avoided such events. People trying to impress themselves and each other didn't appeal to me. But that night I was bored, so I went. Of course, all the women were dressed to match. There were some very beautiful ones there, and I'm a guy, so I was dancing, flirting, having a good time. Sherry was there with someone else, but I managed to dance with her. There was a spark, we both felt it, but it was with someone else, so I didn't pursue it. As I was leaving, the hostess put something in my hand. Call her. She kissed me on the cheek, and I shook her hand and drove away. I looked at the paper as I got into my truck. It was Sherry. I put it in the basket, intending to call, but Christmas was a busy time for my party supply business, so I left it at that. The week before Christmas, she came into the store, talked to Myra, and pointed me out. Myra giggled and wrote her a check. She approached. I'd like to pick up my rental. Sure, what's the matter? She handed me the paperwork. Male, good-looking, as chaperone for a Christmas party. Term, 5 hours. Duties, pleasant conversationalist, good dancer, kissing skills determined. Inability to dial a phone number, considered if willing to be trained. Delivery to the specified address. What can I say? She was about 5'8", a pretty face and breasts that seemed to defy gravity. Miss, I will personally take care of your rental. In addition, we offer a money-back guarantee if the services prove unacceptable. Fair enough? She held out her hand. It's a deal, but be warned. I expect to be satisfied or I want my money back. Eventually, she burst into laughter, and we went for coffee and discussed further terms. Myra insisted that I buy a new suit, and not trusting me, made me take her to the mall with me. Her husband agreed, saying it was impossible to refuse such entertainment. Just want to see her make a man unhappy who isn't me. 4 hours, come what may, I would have taken the first one, but it just didn't fit. 8 suits later, she announced that it was the one. I breathed a sigh of relief, but her husband only laughed. You don't think you're done, do you? No, hell no, we're not done yet. The perfect shirt and tie, even the socks had to be inspected. It took another 40 minutes to pick out shoes. You're not going to pick out my underwear, are you? Myra didn't blink an eye. Dark blue boxers, silk. You want to feel as good as you look, and I've already taken care of that. Please. Remind me to fire you sometime. Only if my severance package includes costume modeling, and I expect to see those drawers as well. You're rehired. If I beg you on my knees in the food court, will you let us go home? Maybe if you give me your word, you'll cut your hair tomorrow. Her husband only laughed as we got into the car. I decided that heck, I was already dressed to the hilt, so I might as well go for a chic ride, so I rented a Cadillac Escalade for the weekend. When I arrived to pick her up, I was feeling pretty stunning, but when I saw her, I realized I had overdone it. I'd love to be the artist who painted this dress on her. Shimmering green, with a slit at the side high enough that you could see the top of the seams, a neckline reaching almost to her navel. I had no idea how she was restraining those puppies, as I found out later with double-sided tape, and despite the boldness of the outfit, she looked elegant. As I was helping her into the car, I managed to catch a glimpse of her garters. I'm sure we talked on the way, but I still can't remember a word. We danced, we socialized. I was introduced to people I'd instantly forgotten. She was the hit of the party and was always being asked to dance. She always looked wary, but it was up to her. She was dancing a slow number with a guy who was getting a little on the nose, and I was halfway through the song. She grabbed my hand and left Mr. Octopus standing there. No more slow dancing with anyone but you. She hissed in my ear as we walked back to the table. It worked on me. On the way home, she snuggled as close to me as she could and nibbled on my ear. Every time we stopped at a stoplight, I kissed her until the cars honked. Before leaving her house, we steamed the windows. After about 20 minutes, she asked me to walk her to the door, offering me coffee. I sat on the couch while she cleaned the pot and then came out to change into a dress. I was about to doze off when I heard someone clear their throat. I literally fell off the couch. When she said, "Get out of the dress," she meant get out of it and never wear anything else. I thought I was going to go blind. I couldn't speak. She got nervous when I didn't say anything. Here's the thing. I like you a lot. In a normal situation, I would have sent you home tonight. We'd go out maybe a dozen times. I'd let you go farther on each date. And then we'd have a big event. Candles, quiet music, maybe some whipped cream and melted chocolate. But I really liked you, so let's save 4 months and put my mattress to the test. After 12 hours, I did break away to bring us breakfast. Otherwise, the Escalade did not move for 2 days. We moved in together after 2 months and married after 7. We agreed to spend a few years together before starting a family. She was 25 and I was 29. 3 years passed and I kept hinting at starting a family. For some reason, about a year ago, she started to change, became more demanding, more materialistic. She decided we needed a new house to start a family. Our house had 4 bedrooms and I just didn't see the need for more. Then she maxed out the credit card she'd managed to get despite her credit history and didn't speak to me for 2 days when I cut her in two after paying it off. She had a job, made pretty decent money, but stayed broke. I paid all the bills, just electric, phone, cable, and other normal household expenses except groceries. She agreed from the beginning that this would be her responsibility, and I let her do it. If you opened her closet, you'd see clothes with tags she'd probably never wear and 4 or 5 pairs of shoes that had never seen the ground. The silence about the car episode lasted about 5 days. On the sixth day, she came home and found me pulling her clothes out of the closet. She watched but remained silent. I'm not going to live like that. If I'm going to live alone, I'm going to live alone. I called your mother. She wasn't happy but agreed to let you stay with her for 2 weeks. By then, we should be able to find you an apartment or a house. I'll put down a deposit, pay the first 2 months' rent, hook up the electricity, and pay the same amount. This will give you time to learn to live on your own, to learn to budget better, because now you have to pay your own way. She surprised me and passed out. I took off her clothes and laid her on the floor, taking a cold rag and wiping her forehead. She woke up in surprise. Will, I just had the strangest dream. You were kicking me out, but I don't remember why. She looked at her part of the closet through the open door, noticed the clothes on the bed beside her, the suitcases on the floor, and cried. She started sobbing, begging me not to make her leave, telling me she would be better off. Please, please, please. I let her go for a while, after which I told her to wash off her makeup and meet me in the kitchen. She lowered herself onto a kitchen chair without meeting his gaze. I'm serious, Sherry. I'm not going to live like this anymore. These tantrums, the out-of-control spending, the refusal to talk about starting a family. It's like I don't know you anymore. If you want to leave, say so. If not, things have to change. She eventually confessed that the thought of motherhood scares the hell out of her. She constantly remembers her childhood. She was the second of 3 children, only a year apart in age. As the middle child, she was lost in the hustle and bustle, and when her parents separated when she was 12, it affected her deeply. I can still see my mom crying. She had 3 teenagers, she was alone, and the stress was getting to her. She started drinking and pretty much ignored us. My dad didn't show up after the first of the year. He moved halfway across the country. I don't want to expose a child to that. I took her hand. Darling, I'm sorry you had such a childhood. But I'm not talking about a full house, just one. If we decide we want another one, we'll wait at least 2 years. And it's a big deal, but I'll never leave you. I promise. For about 3 weeks, we were careful to avoid each other, but gradually we turned into a normal young couple. She stopped spending so much and even opened a savings account. 3 months later, she showed me the balance, and I was amazed. I told her how proud I was of her. She laughed. Don't be too proud. It'll be empty after a while. I thought she was going to say she was going to buy a new car, but she said no. She had another use for the money. She was going to buy furniture for the nursery, and I was going to have to paint it. And I liked the light blue color. It took a second for it to come to consciousness. What? What did you just say? She smiled that smile that women have when they realize they've succeeded in turning your world upside down. I said we're going to have a son in about 7 months. The nursery needs to be finished, so you're going to have to cut back a little on the store, especially near the end. I never cried in her presence. She told me about it in my office, having just come from the doctor's office. She had stopped taking her pills, wanting to surprise me. And the plan worked. When the tears started, it scared her. Did I make a mistake? I thought that's what you wanted. If you... That was all she had time to say before I covered her with kisses. Soon enough, her tears mingled with mine. Myra realized something was wrong when we came out later. Distinguished by her delicacy and restraint, she blabbed. What the hell is going on with you two? You look like someone slapped you and you both enjoyed it. Myra, can you keep a secret? She nodded affirmatively. This woman was better than the internet when it came to the rapid dissemination of information. Myra, we're having a baby. 7 more months and it will be a boy. Promise me you won't tell anyone. We want to surprise my mom. Promise? Uh-huh, she muttered, trying to pull her phone out of her pocket as she walked away. I watched her, smirking, then turned back to Sherry. I hope you've already told your mom. She grinned back. I looked in here before I got here. Everyone in town will know about it before closing tonight. I figured if we told her, it would take the burden off me. As was her habit, when we went to lunch, people stopped us in the street to hug Cher and shake my hand. We hardly had time to eat because of the constant congratulations. When we returned, there was a huge banner hanging over the counter, white with blue bows. Congratulations to Will and Sherry. It's a baby. I looked at Myra and she smirked. Like I could keep such a big secret. You assholes knew I'd explode if I couldn't tell anyone. I laughed and went back into the study. The pregnancy was a failure. After 7 months, Sherry was put on bed rest. I looked at her pale, gaunt face and realized that we would never have another child. It would be too dangerous for her. Sherry wasn't a model patient. Her mother had moved in with her, the only one who could be there for her, mostly because when things got really bad, she'd ask her to shut up and leave her alone for a couple of hours. The labor lasted 17 hours before they finally performed a C-section. Sherry was on the verge of exhaustion. When she was finally able to speak, she told me, "Never again." I agreed with her. She was already in the hospital, so she had her tubes tied before she left. William Bryan Sanford weighed almost 9 pounds, which explained a lot of her pain. He had a full head of thick black hair, just like me. I was disappointed when the nurse said they would probably come out before his real hair color showed up. She was wrong. He had never lost his hair, and it remained black. If you've never experienced it, all the words in the universe can't describe the feeling you get when you become a parent. It is breathtakingly beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It is no longer about you, and it will never be about you again, even when they are grown. They become your world, and everything you do is sublimated into their well-being. Spontaneous trips and romantic weekends are a thing of the past. Now you have to plan everything, load up on the necessary gear, even if it's just a trip to the grocery store. To my disappointment, Sherry didn't take motherhood as well as I thought she would. She obviously loved him, but as soon as I came home, she would hand him to me and lay in the chair for an hour. She called it baby recovery time. I didn't mind, walking around with him in my arms, talking about how the day went and what I wanted out of our life together. I talked about Little League, Boy Scouts, camping, girls, anything that would interest a boy. He scrutinized my face, humming and smiling without understanding a word. Sherry was incredibly annoyed that he never cried with me. I'd come home and he'd be crying, especially if he wasn't feeling well. I'd pick him up and start walking him, and 90% of the time he'd calm down right away. I took 2 weeks off to be with Sherry and Billy after giving birth. When I got back, there was a big sign in front of the building: Sanford and Son Equipment Rentals. No junk. Myra and Charlie stood there grinning. Tears came to my eyes. I had a slideshow of Billy, Sherry, and us together on my screensaver. My friendship with the Hatfields began gradually. One day, Angie came over and wanted to rent a tractor. I asked what she needed the tractor for. "I want to plant a garden. I've already ordered seeds from Baker's Creek. I need a tractor and equipment to prepare the beds." I admired her determination, but would not rent her a tractor. This surprised her immensely. "Why not?" "Because you don't know how to operate it. Tractors can be very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. If I lease it to you and you kill yourself, I'll feel really bad. Plus, I'll lose you as a customer and a friend. I don't want that on my conscience. Besides, you don't need to rent it. I've seen that little Yanmar and all the equipment in your shed. You already have everything you need." Mr. Henderson had a big auction when he retired and got rid of all his farm equipment. He bought the Yanmar later because he liked having a tractor around and he liked to garden. I bet it didn't even have 500 hours on it. It won't turn on. I saw the look of determination on her face. I knew that if I didn't help her, she would find someone else. "The battery's probably dead." "Look, tomorrow's Saturday, why don't I come by and look at it?" "Oh, I couldn't take you away from your family." "No. They'll be with me." That Saturday, I took Sherry and Billy to my house and Angie cooed over the baby for an hour, holding her in her arms the whole time. Sherry was annoyed that Billy was crying, but she stopped when Angie picked her up. I took the charger with me and plugged it into the tractor. While it was charging, Bennett and I looked around for a possible garden plot. "Are you sure you want her to ride the tractor?" His answer was honest enough. "No, but you have no idea how determined she can be. I'm asking you to keep an eye on her and give her guidance." We talked about it while Angie and Sherry hid in the kitchen, where we came out with a plate of sandwiches and a big bowl of potato salad. We ate while talking about her garden projects. They cleared the table, refreshed their drinks, and listened to me. Ben and I have already talked about it. He's going to put a crossbar and seatbelt on the tractor before you get serious about it. Come on out to the barn and we'll give you your first lesson. I pulled it out of the barn and had her sit on it. I showed her the brakes, throttle, hydraulics, and gears. I'll tell you this, and I want you to remember and be careful. The gears in a tractor work differently than they do in an automobile. No matter what gear you are in, the tractor will move when you release the clutch. It will not stall like a car. So if you forget and start driving in a high gear, you're likely to get the front end off the ground. If you're sitting on a slope or at a bad angle, you could flip it over. That's why I recommend using a collapsible bar. If you're wearing a seatbelt and stay within the bar, you may have to change your pants later, but you shouldn't get hurt. I had her put the car in low gear and low range, and she drove across the field. It was moving so slowly that I could walk beside her giving directions. I had her stop and practice moving the hydraulic three-point hitch up and down. I set up the rotary plow. Try never to start the tractor without any equipment. That way, if you depress the clutch or hit a steep slope, the equipment will catch you and keep you from flipping over. It can throw you out of alignment, but it's worth it considering the alternative. I asked her to put the plow down and make a few passes over the chosen spot. She grinned from ear to ear while Ben took pictures. She was upset when I started the tractor back in the barn and pulled out the key. It wouldn't start anyway, the battery is dead. I've got a friend coming over on Tuesday to install the crossbar and seat belts. I'll get the battery for you and he can install it. He'll give you a key and a spare, which I'll do then. But you shouldn't drive it alone first. Wait until Ben gets home. We'll come back next Saturday and I'll show you how to use and change the equipment. Hugs and handshakes and we were off. On the way home, Sherry was animated. She has a beautiful house. It's nothing like the one Mr. Henderson had. She has paintings on the walls that must be worth thousands. She blurted out that she had a trust fund when we were talking about art. Did you know they still own their house up north? It belonged to her grandmother. Now it belongs to her. Good for them. They're a good couple. They deserve it. The rest of the way home, she was quiet. Later, I saw her studying the prints she had seen and looking at their value. She was right. Some of them were worth thousands. Sherry went back to her job. She loved her job, and we didn't need her income as much yet. Besides, I knew the thought of having to stay home all day with no one to talk to would drive her crazy. We had a good time teaching Angie how to drive the tractor. Ben learned too, but wasn't as enthusiastic as she was. She planted her garden and bought a small cultivator to use when the tractor wasn't needed. She cried when she harvested the first string beans she grew. She continued to expand the garden. I warned her that it would be too much for her, but she laughed. Ben leaves early and comes home late. I can only do so many chores around the house, and I don't really like to sit around and watch TV. Besides, I have a lot to talk about on my blog. She did start a blog, Gone Country, which detailed her experiences of learning to live in the countryside. It was very popular, humorous, entertaining, sometimes serious. There were lots of pictures and videos. Some of them included me because I was helping her. She referred to me as her spiritual advisor in all things rural. It was awkward, especially when Myra started reading it. Angie decided from the beginning that she wanted to be as organic as possible. I introduced her to a friend who owned a stable and kept horses, and he agreed to give her some manure for the garden. The snag was that she had to clean the stalls to get it. I thought that would be the end of it, but soon she had gloves, boots, and thick clothes. On her blog, she called it her shit uniform. The blog even had a picture of her wearing it all, with a bandana covering her hair. She cleaned 3 stalls twice a week. Her compost pile was turning into a mountain. For a while, Sherry rode with me every time I came over, and then she started going less and less often. I heard everything I could about manure, crop rotation, and organic pesticides. I took Billy with me just about every time, putting his carrier in the shade where I could keep an eye on him. In those days, Angie spent about as much time with him as she did gardening. As we became closer friends, I asked her if she ever wanted to have children. Yes. When it didn't happen, we got tested. Ben is infertile. It happened when he was young. We talked about adoption, but he wasn't comfortable with it. I left the subject. He was my husband and soulmate, and I couldn't bear the thought of not being with him. Sometimes when I hold Billy in my arms, I think about what I'm missing. Then he puts his diaper in order, and I'm excited to give him to his parents. Wow, here, take him. She held it out to me like she was holding a bucket of toxic waste. Ben came out later and sat with us in the shade. Will, I want you to do something for me if you can. My new partners and I are planning a meeting. I want to set it up here. An old Southern barbecue. I want you and Sherry to cook it for me. And Will, you get the money, or we don't discuss this further. This isn't a meeting of friends, it's a business meeting. I'd have to pay someone anyway, and I know firsthand how good your restaurant is. I want them to remember it for a long time. I hadn't cooked professionally in years and I missed it. I said yes. He and Angie breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks, Will. I'll need some party supplies, tents, chairs, tables, etc. Angie will coordinate. Most of the clients will be here. I really want to make a good impression. 3 weeks is not a long time to prepare something like this. Angie started meeting with us at our house every day to coordinate everything. My first question was how many people to cook for. We have 80 confirmed, but count on 100. We don't want to run out of food. How many kids? No. Adults only. She saw me frown. What? Nothing, she snorted. Spit it out, Will. If you have an argument, spit it out. Okay. I think you're sending the wrong message. This is the South. Family is very much loved here. You should invite wives and children, make a more personal connection. Some people won't like it, but most will be impressed. And while you should send out invitations, make a phone call. Find out how many kids will be at the party, their ages, and make sure you have age-appropriate games and activities. Saying be sure to come will make a much bigger impression than a note asking for your presence. She sat with her mouth open and called Ben. Have you sent out your invitations yet? No? Good. We need to change them. And I need the names of all the wives and their phone numbers. I'll explain later. Bye, sweetie. She looked at me incredulously. Have you ever thought about running for office? You can win thanks to the kebab vote. No, I said, laughing. I've just been in a lot of parties, and you learn as you go. Angie worked the phones. We went from 100 people to almost 300. We hired 3 neighborhood girls for service. Sherry, Myra, and Charlie worked with me. It was a perfect day. Hot but not unbearable, a light breeze. I set up the tent in the castle as a dining room and built fans into the top poles to keep it cooler. 400 pounds of pork cooked to perfection and shredded. 20 chickens and 2 beef briskets cooked in a separate stove for the Jewish partners. Labels for side dishes so they know what is not kosher. Potato salad, coleslaw, baked beans, zucchini casserole, grilled vegetables, mostly from Angie's garden. For dessert, cakes and brownies in a variety of flavors, all homemade. As a bonus, we had chilled watermelon for the kids. I was exhausted, but it was worth it. 300 people were invited. 420 showed up, the difference being the number of kids. I asked Charlie to keep an eye on the 3 teenagers while they parked their cars. Before dinner, they chatted and socialized for an hour. Self-service was mainly used to maintain an informal atmosphere. Because of the family theme, no alcohol was allowed in the dining tent. I set up a small marquee to the side with 2 kegs and an open self-serve bar, but it was not allowed to be opened until an hour after the meal. The senior partners made sure everyone understood that excessive drinking would be frowned upon. Kids were running in packs, screaming and laughing, playing on the equipment I bought or the games they were playing. Angie and Ben were the best hosts, going from group to group to make sure everyone was having a pleasant time. As is the age-old custom, the men got together to talk business and the women got together to talk about their men. Under each tree in the shade, we placed the usual soft furniture. I paused to admire Sherry, elegant in her conservative sundress, her hair pulled back in a bun. She was surrounded by a group of people complimenting our dish. We both gave and received a bunch of business cards. Just before the end of the event, we gathered everyone in a tucked-away dining tent to give a short speech. I had set up a small public address system with microphones. The senior partner thanked everyone for coming and wished them success in their future endeavors. He praised Angie and Ben for organizing the event and thanked Sherry and I for hosting it. Next, he surprised everyone with his words. He was known for speaking at length. That's all I'm going to say. It's been so much fun, I'm not going to spoil it. We have some food left and there are containers. Don't waste it, take some home. Also, the ice cream is ready. Let's all take a portion each. He walked out of the auditorium to the most standing ovation he said he had ever received for a speech. We had ice cream machines with different flavors installed and ready to go. Chocolate, banana, pineapple, blueberry, and of course vanilla. The kids, as well as some adults, got ice cream headaches for eating it too fast. Angie's garden was very popular. I saw her several times with groups of women and 1 or 2 men giving tours and answering questions. She would often pick a ripe tomato or a handful of beans and hand them out. Some of the watermelons we refrigerated for dessert were from her bed. They quickly became the most sought after because their seeds were a little larger than usual, which gave them more opportunities in the seed spitting contest the kids were having. Sherry nearly had a stroke when Angie handed her the check. The celebration had gotten so big that they hadn't let Ben pay the bill, turning it into a real corporate event. There was another check, a 25% bonus, with a note from the senior partner thanking us again. I took the premium check and gave part of it to Charlie, Myra, and the kids we used. I gave the rest to Sherry. She deserved it. Ben worked for a firm that did mostly business law, and I started getting calls before the next week to do parties. The demand was so great and the profits so good that we registered as a separate business. Sherry quit her job and became a manager. She was good and getting better. Of course, all the rentals were coming from us. I had to promote Myra to rental manager, and she hired her husband. He was laid off and we needed help, so everything worked out great except for one thing. She's the boss at home and she's the boss at work too. I'll never make another decision for the rest of my life. It's your fault, Will. Get over it, Donnie. Just think, how many men literally entertain their boss at the end of the day? That cheered him up. Sherry started dressing better, and sometimes she had to have evening meetings with clients. We finally made enough money to buy her a Cadillac. I thought I had it all worked out. Winter has come and gone. In the party business, Saturday was a work day. You were either working the event itself, planning the event, or meeting with clients. By arrangement, Sherry handled the meetings and planning, and I coordinated the equipment, staff, and food preparation. We actually made more money from the parties than we did from the rental business. We never seemed to have time for each other. This reached a breaking point when she started having meetings on Saturdays, sometimes not getting home until after 11 o'clock. I asked her not to do this, but she said she had to meet at the client's request, and it was best for them. After 3 weeks in a row, I lost my temper. I told her that the next late meeting would be up to her. I wouldn't cook, I wouldn't coordinate, I wouldn't be there. I thought it was a partnership, she shouted. Right now, I'm more interested in a husband and wife partnership. Make a choice about what is more important to you, business or us. She grumbled some more, but I ignored her and went after Billy. He'd been woken up by her screams. I carried out my threat. The next month, she had an appointment that left her out of the house until 11:30. On Sunday afternoon, she wanted to plan it with me. No. What's not, sweetheart? I don't help plan or coordinate it, and I sure as hell don't cook for it. I told you the next contract that costs me a Saturday night with my wife will be the first one she has to do on her own. I guess I'll take Billy for a ride. I left her with her mouth open. It was a disaster. They didn't like the food, the service, or the atmosphere. There was no bonus, and the customer told her how disappointed they were that she didn't live up to her reputation. Up until that point, she had treated me like crap. On Sunday, she came out of her bedroom with a small white handkerchief, waving it. A truce? I fed Billy breakfast. No. Her eyes widened. I will not accept an armistice. I want to surrender. Meet my conditions and we'll move on with our lives. Refuse or ignore them, and that's the end of it. No negotiations. No negotiation. Take it or leave it. I lifted Billy into my arms. I'm going to visit Ben and Angie. He needs my advice on a matter. We'll be back in an hour or so. Billy loved Angie and she adored him. She was often our babysitter when we worked at the party. He was just learning to talk, and one of his first words was Angie. She cried when he said it. He was learning to walk, and as soon as I put him on the ground, he would run to it as fast as his little uncertain gait would allow. He learned to say Ben and tried to follow when he could. Ben wanted to ask me about a small race car that was in one of the barns. Mr. Henderson didn't drive the car, but he loved racing and sponsored it. I knew the engine had blown up, but the frame and transmission worked. Do you think it can be fixed? No, it needs a new engine and a few little things. It can't be repaired, but it can be rebuilt. Why would you want to do that? He looked embarrassed. I'm a huge NASCAR fan. I've always wanted to drive a race car. This would be perfect. Well, you could never tell. How does Angie feel about it? She doesn't really want to, but she's willing to watch one race. I need you to tell her it's safe. It is, isn't it? Relatively. I don't know of anyone who has died in a car like that, but you can get injured. Start with beginner races and learn as you go. We got the car fixed. Ben took some lessons from the older racers, and soon he was racing every Friday night at the local dirt track. Sherry and I kissed and made up, and one night we went to watch them. It was noisy, dirty, and I could tell Ben was enjoying it. Charlie and a few neighborhood kids were his pit crew. The rules were pretty relaxed, so we were in the pits with them. Ben was in the lead when he started to lose speed and position and drove into the pits. There was nothing wrong with the car. He had been fighting the flu all week and the heat had weakened him. We got him out of the car and started putting fluids into him. They were both disappointed. He was leading his class in points and it looked like he could be the points champion. If he didn't finish the race, it made his chances much worse. Charlie spoke up. You know, in case of illness, he's allowed a substitute. He looked right at me. It won't work, Charlie. The cage is designed for his size, and I won't fit in there. Someone his size or smaller will fit in here. We both turned and looked at Angie. Oh no. I don't know anything about racing. You don't need to race. All you need to know is how to shift gears. Just stay behind the group and stay out of the way. He'll get credit for finishing the race and he'll save a lot of points. Ben listened to the conversation. Do it, honey. I really want that trophy. The cage will protect you, just be careful. She stared at him for a few seconds. Give me a helmet. And if I crash, not a word. We buckled her in. Stay down below. Keep a steady speed and they'll catch you and leave you alone. Are you sure about that? She looked me in the eye. No. Then she stepped on the gas and the gravel scattered in all directions. The first 15 laps were fairly quiet. The other riders knew the score and left her alone. All but one. He was behind Ben in the points race, and if he knocked the car out of the race before the finish, it would improve his position considerably. On the next lap, he collided with her, which scared the hell out of Angie. We heard her yelling into the headset. What the hell is he doing? I had a different headset. He's trying to knock you out of the race. The next time he jumps out at you, hit the brakes and then step on the gas. He'll hit you, but he won't have enough speed to do serious damage, and if he accelerates, he might get tangled up in traffic and lose a couple of positions. She executed it perfectly. He flew towards her, she was able to brake before he picked up speed, and as soon as he touched her bumper, she took off. He got tangled up in a pile of cars and she actually won the lap. He caught up with her again, but this time luck was on his side and he slammed her into the wall. The caution alarm went off and she pit-caged. She flew out of the cage, looking at the crumpled fender. She threw her helmet into the car. Can you fix it? We could have pulled it out, but we wouldn't have had time to get it in shape. She was pumped up. I guess she liked it. Rip the damn thing off and get me back in the race. I'm gonna run this asshole into the wall. Go. Charlie pulled on the wing as I put her in the cage and buckled her in. Don't be stupid. It leads to injuries. Watch him. He'll do the same thing again when he gets a chance. Charlie yelled, Clear! And she was back in the race. She was driving like it was a stolen Maserati. She was outrunning cars. She saw it coming, and I yelled into the headset. Cut to the left, now! She taxied to the top of the highway, taking him by surprise. He slammed into a neighboring car, throwing it aside and causing pandemonium. Angie sped past him, and when the caution was lifted, she was third. By the time the checkered flag came out, she had taken the lead, but because of lost laps, she finished 7th out of 15. The guy who tried to ram her was unable to finish, so he is listed 15th on the timesheets, which further set him back from Ben. He and his team were pulling into the pit when Angie got out of the car and pulled off her helmet. How does it feel to be driven by a girl, asshole? She turned around, bent over, and patted her ass. Then she started giggling and hugging Ben. The guy didn't know what to do. He finally got a lungful of air, but then I intervened. The words out of your mouth should be polite. She beat you at your own game. Use that as experience. His own team, ready for battle moments ago, grinned openly. He turned on his heel and walked away. Sherry was taking pictures like crazy. After that, Angie got hooked on it. She used some of her trust money to buy a car. The local track had a women's division and she raced in it for the rest of the year. She started too late for points but won 2 races. Ben won his trophy. They had already started planning for next year. His firm and some of their clients had agreed to paint both cars the same colors, with their logos prominently displayed. Our company's logos were on them too. It was a small, outlaw dirt track, barely legal and recognized, so they knew it was just a recreational activity, even though many successful racers started their careers on such tracks. But for Angie and Ben, it was a shared hobby that brought them even closer together. What did Sherry and I have in common? Nothing except Billy. Our business was growing, and now we had two crews. She dressed prettier, acted more arrogant, and had little time for Billy and me. She joined a professional women's organization and became active, getting together for meetings and drinks every 2 weeks. I didn't mind, and when she received the award, I was very proud. I attended the banquet, and when I was introduced as her husband, I saw the worried looks of several of her girlfriends. I was not as stupid as people thought and asked her about it. Some of these women looked awfully surprised when I was introduced as your husband. Do you have a city husband that you don't tell me about? I was joking, but her face turned horribly red. She's well on the mend. No, honey, they were just surprised to see that I didn't make you up. You really should come to mixers with me more often. Let me show you off. A perfectly reasonable explanation, but it wasn't quite right. We were swamped with work, so I put it off for later. She must have woken up and stayed close to home. It was early fall and things were slowing down. We went back to the same crew. They were well-trained, and sometimes we left them to sort themselves out, and one or the other of us would politely show up to assure the customer. We had a good client base, and some of them became good friends. His boss called me and wanted to throw a combined birthday-winning celebration for Ben. He was a nice guy and very good at what he did, and they wanted to show their appreciation and let him brag about his racing career. They wanted me to cook. How much? About 40, all adults? Just his friends. We don't want you there professionally, per se, but you're probably the best friend he has outside of work. He says that if it weren't for you, he and Angie might never have stayed. We just didn't want to offend you by inviting someone else. I'd love to cook, but let's not get carried away. How about this? I'll cook the meat, pork, and chicken and make coleslaw. Have your wives prepare the desserts and side dishes. I'm sure he'll appreciate it more. I told Sherry about it and gave her the date. I have an event on the same day. We've already signed a contract. I can't. I was a little pissed off. They're our friends. If they hadn't asked us to throw a party the first time, we wouldn't even have a business. It would be an insult if you didn't show up. Politely show up to the party, make sure everything is running smoothly, hand it over to the team, and come back. Think of Angie and Ben. I hauled the slabs away and set them up. I drove my truck back to the house to make another parking lot. Since our properties were connected, Ben and I had built a little road through the woods from my patio to his porch. We rode back and forth on quad bikes. It was much faster that way. If I pulled into the driveway and saw a pink helmet on the railing, I knew Angie had arrived. The party was in full swing. Everyone was socializing and having a great time. Sherry had just called and said she was stuck at work, but would be there within the hour. We were running low on ice that one of the partners was supposed to bring in. I had some ice in the freezer left over from a party the week before, so I volunteered to ride my four-wheeler and get some. I had to take Ben's car because mine was locked. He forgot to put gas in it, and I ran out of gas halfway home and had to walk. I was about to come out of the woods when I saw them. The blinds on the patio door were pulled back, and you could walk right into the living room. There was a couple sitting on the couch, really getting it on. I figured one of the neighborhood kids had gotten into the house. There had been an increase in break-ins lately. They weren't taking much, but they were having little parties and vandalizing, drinking whatever they could find and messing up the beds. I had already reached out my hand to call 911 when the lovers moved. A woman approached me. It was Sherry. I recognized the man, one of the younger employees from Ben's office. They were wondering why he had to miss the party. My first impulse was to barge in and beat the shit out of both of them, but having a lawyer best friend taught me something. Prior to moving here, Ben worked for a time as a divorce attorney. I hate it, he once told me. You get cynical watching people tear their worlds apart. If they would just approach it logically, it would save them a lot of grief. Unfortunately, it's hard to act logically, especially if they've witnessed infidelity. And if someone is assaulted, things get even worse. Usually it's a guy, and it significantly weakens their bargaining position. Sometimes they lose their children because her lawyer describes his violent tendencies in murderous terms. No one wins in a divorce, especially if there are children involved. Lawyers make money, but that's about it. Standing in the woods and watching your wife betray you is hard enough to be reasonable. Shaking with rage, I headed for the door when I remembered Ben's words. I also remembered what he had said about favorable positions, and I hid behind the trees. I walked a little way down the path and called out to Ben. He replied in a happy, slightly booming voice. Hey, buddy, what's taking so long? Do I need to send Angie for you? No, put Angie down. I need to ask her something. Angie came to her senses and asked if she needed to come get me. She hadn't had much to drink, so her head was clear. Angie, I really need your help. I just saw Sherry at the house and she wasn't alone and she wasn't wearing much clothing. I want to meet her face to face, but I don't think that's a good idea right now. I need the most sober one of them to come as a witness. And I need a recommendation for a divorce lawyer. Help me out. You could hear the pain in her voice. Poor fellow. Are you sure? Never mind, if you weren't sure, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Stay away until I come. 20 minutes later, Angie, Ben, and his partner's 2 wives came down the path. Are you sure, Will? I showed them the pictures I had on my phone. One of the women spoke up. I'm a divorce lawyer, Will, a damn good one. I have a separate practice. My husband decided it was a good idea. I offer advice on how to proceed and my services if you need them. I never knew her to be a lawyer in her own right. I only knew her socially as the wife of one of Ben's partners. Angie hugged me and rubbed my shoulders, trying to calm me down, and told me to think of Billy. Thank you, Julie. I'll take both if you agree. What do I need to do? The hardest thing you can do in this situation is to remain calm. Don't engage them in conversation when we confront them. Let me do the talking. Control yourself, Will. It will give you an advantage. She smiled a wolfish smile in the darkness. But if he's stupid enough to try to attack you in front of a bunch of lawyers, you have every right to defend yourself. Ben picked up the phone. They're almost here. Let's go. They set the whole thing up. The most senior of the partners was already pulling up to my driveway, presumably to get the promised ice. The others waited outside on the deck, climbing the side steps and avoiding the light from the patio door. We heard a knock. Sherry? Are you there? Will sent us to get ice. We're out of it. He continued to talk loudly when she didn't open the door. Well, he did give us a key. Come on, boys. I don't like being in someone else's house when he's not there. Sherry and her lover were gathering clothes when they heard the door open. She swung the door open and he ran out onto the deck to hide in the darkness. When I turned on the light, the look on his face was priceless. We had a switch outside for when we wanted to enjoy the dark and didn't want to go back inside. We were usually just about to undress at that time. 4 cell phones clicked as he stood holding his pants, shorts, and shoes. Sherry had time to get dressed, led her partners into the kitchen, and saw us standing on the porch. She screamed, ran out of the house, and fled. He didn't know what to say, but the senior partner raised his hand. Not a word. Be in my office at 9 o'clock on Monday. Now go. He put all the power a senior executive could muster into his voice and walked away. Angie and Ben sat next to me, each holding my hand so I wouldn't fall into a stupor. Julie gave me her card, telling me to be at her office at 2 o'clock on Monday afternoon. Then she gave me a hug. We all went back to the party. I went so I wouldn't have to stay in the house. Naturally, everyone left early and I spent the night in their guest room. I didn't sleep for a long time and Angie made me get up by sicking Billy on me. It's impossible to sleep when you have a 2-year-old in your care. I realized with a shock that I hadn't thought about how to protect him, and Angie got up early to pick him up, telling my mother-in-law that I was having too good a time, and she volunteered to pick him up for me. She had picked him up before when we first started our party business. He sat on Angie's lap and she let him feed her breakfast, smearing syrup all over her face and giggling like crazy. It made us smile. When she took him into the bathroom to get them both cleaned up, Ben said we'd talk when we put him to bed. In the afternoon, we held our first military conference. Angie got to the heart of the matter. Divorce? Yes. I look back now and see it happening. We stopped sharing dreams. She always wanted to live in the big city. I've always been a country boy. My roots are deep here. What about Billy? I want custody, no doubt about it. I think a child would interfere with the lifestyle she wants. Ben has a few observations. I agree that Billy doesn't fit the lifestyle, but he gives her power over you. She can wage a custody battle over you to get a bigger financial settlement. And the rest of it doesn't matter anymore. Careful, Julie. She'll get at your throat and run over anyone who stops her. We have to keep the negotiations from turning into a war. I didn't see her for 6 days. I came home and there she was. It took everything I had not to throw her out the door. She saw my eyes and backed away. Please don't say anything right now. I may deserve it, but I'm only here to get my stuff and see Billy. Please, Will. Just for a little while. And then I'll leave quietly. You can even take my car keys. I gave in to her entreaties, staying out of it and letting her play with Billy. She'd been paying so little attention to him lately that he seemed bored. She asked for her keys back so she could open the trunk, and then asked if I would help her take her clothes out. I went in for another round when I heard her car start. I walked through the door and was beside her before she could put it in gear. I snatched the keys and threw them into the driveway. She screamed as I pulled Billy out of the car seat. Screw you! He's mine, and you can't keep him! Billy screamed, not knowing what was going on. She was cursing all she could when she noticed Angie filming everything on her iPhone. She came over on her four-wheeled motorcycle, which she had designed herself to see Billy and make sure I was okay. She would stop by for 30 or 40 minutes and go home just in time for Ben to arrive. You bitch! Could have known you'd be here. Give him some before hubby got home? How many times has poor Ben gotten sloppy seconds? Is he hiding in the closet and watching? Angie turned white with anger. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't screamed. Sherry, leave, and I mean right now. From now on, if you want to visit Billy, get permission from the court. Now get out of my life before I call the police. I had a lot more I wanted to say, but I had Billy at the top of my list. Sherry walked away, continuing to scream. Angie wrote down every word. The next day, Julie had the tape and filed for an injunction until Sherry underwent a psychiatric evaluation. She recorded her screaming. I wondered where she lived. Apparently, the guy she was with had become her new lover, and they were together. Another strike against her. He was fired because of the affair. They used flowery language, but the point was clear. You quit, no references. He took a job at another firm with a lower salary. I sent out a letter to all of our customers informing them that I was no longer involved in the business, but that I would fulfill any remaining contracts. After that, Sherry was in charge. I was about to say screw it, but Julie talked me out of it. You have a good reputation, and you might want to come back to this case later. Besides, it gives Sherry a real income that might come in handy later on. She got her lawyer, and the dance began. She wanted the house. Too bad it was still in my parents' name. She wanted the party equipment. Since it was rented from my company, which was stipulated in the prenuptial agreement, she couldn't afford it. Julie froze most of our accounts. By forced agreement, she ran one team, I ran the other. Money could only be taken out for payroll and supplies. The rest had to remain frozen until the divorce. All profits made after I fulfilled my obligations went into a new account completely controlled by Sherry. That was about as fair as I could make it. Sherry struggled until Julie and her lawyer convinced her to take the deal if she expected to have any money left at all. She wanted to have one last meeting to vent, but I refused. As it turned out, her lawyer was the fifth lover she'd dated in the last 18 months. All of them were slick city types, most with no money. I couldn't think of anything to say to her that wouldn't end with the phrase, "goddamn bitch." I tried to stay polite for Billy's sake. He was turning 3, and he didn't miss her that much. She ended up getting the party and catering business, giving me a fourth of the profits. I really didn't have any more time, so Julie beckoned me with a carrot. As a result, she was left with the business and some working capital. That was all the money she got from me. I got full custody of Billy. She had broad visitation rights. I never denied her. However, she had to stick to the rules. No men while she had Billy, and if she ever exposed him to anything that was considered morally or physically dangerous, she lost her rights. After a year, the visits became less and less frequent. Billy didn't seem to mind. Angie and Ben became my anchors. They helped me deal with my grief and anger. Sherry's mom still babysat Billy, agreeing that if she helped Sherry break the custody agreement, all contact with him would cease. Angie became a surrogate with Ben's blessing. He still followed Ben around, and at work Ben had a picture of him, Angie, and Billy on his desk. People thought he was his stepson, and he let them up to a point. At first he asked my permission, saying it made him look like a family man and that it helped him with new clients. I surprised him terribly when I gave him a copy of my will, naming them as Billy's executors and guardians should anything happen to me. You're a family man, Ben. You always have been. You have the most impressive woman I've ever seen, and you have us. I've never seen a male lawyer cry. It was touching. After a while, I dated a few. They were fun and met my needs, but I never met anyone I would consider as a long-term partner. Angie gave me hell by telling me that Billy needed a mother. I just looked at her. He has one, and as soon as I find a match for her, I'll be married so fast it'll make your head spin. The closest I got was a lawyer. It was the senior partner's daughter. She was a few years older, had just gone through a bad divorce, had found a very good job on the other coast, and had taken 3 months off to recover. She needed an escort, and her father called me. Do me a favor, Will. She's recently arrived in town, and I'd really like her to go to the banquet with me, but she has to have an escort. She's considered beautiful, if that helps. There was nothing to do, so I agreed. I rented a Cadillac, and it was déjà vu. Was she beautiful? Damn beautiful. Barely 5 feet tall, blonde, fair-skinned, with a very nice body. She looked like a breathing porcelain doll. I could feel my interest growing. I think she felt a little spark and her simmering personality took over. Ooh, a real live redneck. I've never been this close to one before. Do you bite? I looked at her with my most serious look. Yes. Great. Ben, Angie, and her parents burst into laughter, and that set the tone for the entire evening. It was a charity event, the most prestigious of the year. Black tie, the whole thing. I thought I looked pretty dressed up. The food was delicious, and Rhonda was talking nonstop. She later told me it was a nervous trait. She talked about the appetizer, the entree, the dessert. Have you ever stopped talking? She blushed, then gave me an innocent smile. Only when I have something interesting in my mouth. Ben sipped his coffee through his nose and Angie giggled. Come on, you two. This is supposed to be serious business. After that, there was a big orchestra and dancing. Angie taught me how to dance so I wouldn't get discouraged. Sophie was a wonderful dance partner, graceful, fluid, and a pleasure to watch. She danced twice with her father, and once with Ben, and all the other dances were mine. Ben and I were waiting for the girls by the bandstand when Sherry walked by. Ben, Will, it's good to see you. Are you out here by yourself, Will? You really should go outside more often. Let me introduce you to my escort. Robert Morgan. Perhaps you know his father, Ben Wilson Morgan, the founder of the Morgan bank chain? I stared at her as she tried to impress us. Her face was calloused, and she looked like she'd gained 10 pounds. One look at her escort, and you could tell he wasn't with her for intelligent conversation. At this time, Angie and Sophie approached. She kissed my cheek. Do you miss me, love? Good. I want you to be upset all night. It'll be more fun that way when we make the crazy, passionate love you promised me. Oh, I'm sorry. Who were your friends? I looked past her and saw Angie laughing. I knew right away that she'd told Sophie who Sherry was, and they'd played it out to the fullest. Where are my manners? Sophie, this is Robert Morgan of the Morgan banking family. And this is Sherry Blankenship. I made her drop my name and revert to her maiden name, a local businesswoman and my ex-wife. Sherry, Robert, this is Sophie Williams of the firm of Williams, Roberts, Howe, and Hatfield. Perhaps you've heard of them? Well, my dear, shall we dance the waltz? We left them both with their mouths open. As we waltzed off, I whispered, Angie told you who she was, didn't she? Sophie snuggled a little closer to him. Yes, and a bit of history. I hope she's having a rough time today. Don't worry, from the way they're looking at us, I think they are. We finished, and she pulled my head to hers, giving me a 2-minute tongue kiss. Did she see that? Give me a minute for the blood to return to my brain. Yes, she saw that, and thank you. You're welcome, and it was my pleasure. Of course, they came to the table a little later. Robert asked Sophie to dance, and Sherry asked me to dance. Just for old time's sake. Sophie smiled sweetly. I'd love to, but I promised my lover all the rest of the dances. So am I. Sorry, Sherry, maybe next time. They looked stunned, and Angie pressed a napkin to her mouth to suppress a laugh. They left without another word. I looked at Sophie. I'm glad you're not staying here permanently. She looked hurt. Why did you say such a nasty thing? I'm starting to like you. Because wherever we went, there would be fights everywhere. I fought to keep men away from you, and you fought to keep me away from you. She smiled. Slowly. What makes you think I'll resist? She didn't resist, and we spent every spare minute together. Angie wouldn't even let Billy go so we could spend the weekend together. She was the best lover I'd had so far. Despite her small stature, she was surprisingly strong. She never told me her age, but I guessed she was in her 40s, and she was as firm and supple as a 20-year-old. She told me that the old-timers called it a round trip, and I was racking up frequent flyer miles. She adored Billy and showed me pictures of her daughter, a cute little copy of her. She looked 13 years old. My ex has her now. I gave him more time because soon we'll be 3,000 kilometers apart. It made me sad to think of Billy being so far away. Life goes on. To pass the time, I opened a barbecue restaurant. Myra was still renting and doing so well that I left her alone. Restaurants are very time-consuming and the success rate is terrible. But I already had a good reputation, and I was successful. I bought 4 food trucks, outfitted them, and sent them out to neighboring towns 4 days a week. They were very successful. I still didn't have anyone permanent in my life, and I had pretty much given up looking. It catches up with you when you least expect it. When you begin to love your life, when you are truly happy. I'm not talking about love, I'm talking about tragedy. Billy was 9. He would get off the bus at Angie's house and ride his little four-wheeler through the woods when I got home. She would ride with him, wave at me, and walk home. She would feed him his afternoon snack, check his schoolwork, and he would help her around the house. It was fine with all of us. On the rare occasions when I had a date, he stayed there overnight. Angie had a room set up for him. He called me at 3 o'clock, right after he got off the bus. He was crying. "Come over here soon, Daddy." Aunt Angie is lying on the floor crying, and I can't get her up. I flew down the road. Just as he had said, she was lying on the floor and sobbing quietly. She wasn't answering or talking to me. I was getting ready to dial 911 when Ben's boss called. "Will, I need you to go to Angie and make sure she's okay. I'm with her now and she's not all right. I can't get her to talk. It's not like Ben was in an accident. I can hear the emotion in his voice. Ben is dead, Will. He had a heart attack, and they said death was almost immediate. We found him on the floor of his office when he missed a lunch meeting. He'd been gone for an hour by then." I almost dropped my phone. Ben's gone? He became my best friend, but he was Angie's life. I pulled her into my arms. Her face cleared for a second, and she clung to me like a drowning woman. "Ben! Ben!" I held her on the couch, rocking her like a baby. Tears were flowing, and they weren't all hers. She was a zombie. We finalized the funeral plans after his boss brought us his will. He'd just updated it. He was to be cremated and his ashes scattered around the farm. "This is the only place I have ever felt like home," he stated in his will. Some amazing people gathered for the visitation and service. Most of his clients turned friends. His racetrack buddies came in full force, and all the members and staff of his firm were there. Sherry came and gave Angie a hug. She was sitting during the visitation with Billy on her lap, and Sherry's mother next to her. They had bonded over Billy and were very close. Her eyes followed me around the room, and she would get worried if I was out of sight. Ben was 52 years old, older than Angie, and in good health. The doctors said it was an underlying condition, and they couldn't say for sure what caused it. The funeral was over, friends and family returned to their business, and it was time to grieve. Billy, Sarah, Sherry's mom, and I lived with her for about 2 weeks. She didn't start coming back to life until the end of the second week. We had a slight hiccup when the will was read, mainly because it gave it finality. When he updated his will, he put some letters in it. It was his way of saying goodbye to those he loved. Angie received one of them. To this day, I never asked, and she never told me what was in it. One he left for Billy to open on his 18th birthday. He left one for me, too. "Dear Will, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I want to thank you for your friendship. You took a uptight Yankee lawyer and made him a better person who could relax more and appreciate what he had. I was honored to be your friend. I left something for Billy. It's a college fund, enough for a full tuition. I know you can afford it, but it was my pleasure to do this for him and for you. He's a great kid. I am sure that if he follows your guidance, he will be a better man. I hope he will remember me fondly. Now for the serious stuff. Take care of her, Will. She's going to need you for a while. I know you loved her, and true to your honor and our friendship, you did nothing to hurt her. Angie needs someone to love her right now to help her through the dark times ahead. I'm sorry I won't be around. I'd love to see Billy as a man. You need to find someone on your own before you give up. Thank you for being who you are and for the friend I needed. Ben. Of course, most of his possessions, the farm, the investments, went to Angie. He left the dirt track he loved so much a lot of money to install new, safer grandstands and an announcer's booth, as well as a better public address system. The track was renamed in his honor. For a whole year, Angie tried to find a normal life, but finally gave up. I'm moving to Philadelphia for a while. I can't be here. Everywhere I look, I see his ghost. Even though he was 10 years old, Billy cried for 2 days. I shed tears in private. She had been my anchor for 8 years. I have never felt more lost and alone. She gave us the keys and asked us to keep an eye on the farm. I would come every 2 or 3 weeks, start her little tractor, and drive it around a bit to keep it in good mechanical shape, and walk around the house checking the lights and plumbing. She left the electricity on and installed a state-of-the-art security system. I continued to live my life, focusing on Billy. He was at the age where he wanted to socialize with his friends, and I knew he would soon leave me behind. Our house became a boys' center. There were always at least 3 of his best buddies in the house. I made sure I knew them and their parents well, invited them to visit several times, and talked to them when they picked up their kids. A few of the mothers were divorced and I dated 1 or 2, but nothing serious. They wanted more, especially one. I was still in good shape, owned everything free and clear, and had 2 successful businesses. I opened a franchise restaurant and now had 4 restaurants scattered throughout the state. Each one had at least 3 trucks to service small towns. I was making a lot of money. I found another small town where there was a need for equipment and opened another store. Myra's husband became manager, and her husband was finally able to stop entertaining his boss unless they both wanted to. Sherry lost business. She didn't get the favorable equipment rental deal she used to. Her chef quit to run her own business, and she was losing business until she was forced to close the establishment. She became an office manager for a large insurance company and married a lawyer. It lasted 18 months and he caught her cheating. She's still working and is now engaged. I hope it's for the long haul. She still sees Billy, mostly on holidays and birthdays. I was tired. I was working out of town opening a new restaurant, my 6th. Sarah stayed with Billy while I traveled, and they both stood there grinning. What? I looked down to see if my fly was unzipped. We have a visitor? Come in! It was Angie. She flew into my arms, hugging and crying. She called us, or we called her at least once a month. I could hear the sadness in her voice. I always ended the conversation by asking her to come home. We missed her. She kept saying she would think about it. I asked her how long she planned to stay here. Another 30 or 40 years, I hope. I'm home, Will, and I'm not going to leave. I'm tired of going to the park to see the grass. And I'm tired of living next to people I don't know at all and have no interest in being neighbors. I want to see stars instead of smog when I look up at the sky at night. She took my hand. And I want to see you every day. And Billy, I can't believe how big he is. I bet he'll be taller than you when he stops growing. I want to see Myra, the guys from the driving range, all my real friends. By then she was crying on my shoulder. I just hugged her and felt happy for the first time in almost 2 years. We got her house in order. She looked aged and out of shape, but every week she got fitter, rode her favorite tractor, and tended the garden. Her youth had returned. Sarah moved into a nursing home, renting a 1-bedroom apartment. It was close to home. She was surprised one day when she was moved out of the apartment and into a larger 1-bedroom apartment. She was even more surprised when I asked her to send me all her bills. She protested, but I stopped her. I also funded her checking account regularly. There have been times when Billy and I have really needed you, and you've gotten out of it. This is payback. You should have a bigger apartment so Billy can spend weekends with you, and a happy grandmother is what he needs. End of conversation. We ate together every night he didn't spend with his buddies, either at my house or hers. 3 months passed and we started dating. Movies, concerts, even a little dancing. She visited Ben's old firm and left in tears. They made sure to invite us to all their events. She denied it was dating, saying we were just old friends. Everything fell into place as we sat on the porch swing and watched Billy and his friends tear up the field on 4-wheeled motorcycles. It was a little chilly and we covered ourselves with a light blanket. I stopped swaying and looked into her eyes. Marry me. What? Marry me? I've loved you for years. You love me, but you won't admit it. Let's stop playing musical houses and settle down. Tears ran down her cheeks. But our age. Look, I know you're 50. You know I'm 43. Listen to me. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I love you and I will love you until the day I die. She swayed, sniffling. This is an ultimatum. Marry me, or I swear on Ben's memory I'll never set foot on this property again. Yes or no? Right now. She was silent. I cried, thinking about what I had lost. I was halfway to the porch when she grabbed me. We rolled down the steps and Billy rushed toward us. He helped a crying Angie up. Are you okay? Yes, dear. I just got some good news. In a few days or weeks, I'm officially going to be your mom. I hope that makes you happy. That day, I realized what an extraordinary child I had raised. You've pretty much always been my mom. Now I can say it out loud. I love you, Mom. The wedding and the party afterward have been talked about for years. Myra did her best. We were married in the spring, outdoors, in a meadow on the farm. The castle tent was our reception area. Most of Ben's old friends from his firm were gathered there. Sophie was visiting her parents and came too. She kissed Angie and told her how lucky she was. I realized from the look in her eyes that I had some explaining to do. The guys at the track restored her car and gave it to her as a wedding gift. The years flew by in happiness and harmony. Billy graduated from college, got married, and he and his wife went into business. We gave them my old house as a wedding present after it was completely remodeled. They gave us 3 grandchildren. He named his son Bennett. I had seen her sometimes lapse into melancholy, and I knew she was thinking of him. On their 50th wedding anniversary, I gave her an oil portrait of him by a famous artist. She went to bed and cried for 2 hours. We hung the portrait over the fireplace. It looks solemn, and I know my eyes aren't as good as they used to be, but in the evening, with the fire burning and Angie sitting on the floor playing with our littlest granddaughter, I could swear he's smiling. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.